Hello everyone and welcome to the show. Today's video is part 5 of a 9-part video series where I dive into each of the 9 launch titles that were available for the Atari Video Computer System, which is what the Atari 2600 was known as when it was first introduced in September of 1977. This is the second racing game for the console, but very different from the first one, Indy 500. It differs in gameplay, graphics, and controllers. So let's head back to the racetrack and check out this interesting title, Street Racer. And that is the topic for today's video. I would really like to know if everyone is enjoying these videos. If so, it would really help if you click the like and subscribe buttons and hit that bell icon if you want to be notified of upcoming videos, like the ones for this 9-part launch title series. Alright gang, let's get started. Street Racer was programmed by Larry Kaplan and released in 1977 as one of the 9 Atari VCS launch titles. This was one of the 2 launch titles programmed by Kaplan, the other being Air Sea Battle. While at Atari, he also programmed Brain Games and Bowling. In late 1979, he left Atari and co-founded Activision. There he programmed Bridge and the smash hit Kaboom, one of the 10 top-selling games for the Atari 2600. Street Racer was also published by Sears for their Telegames product line as Speedway 2. What happened to Speedway 1? Well, we do know that Sears had 2 Pong-based car racing consoles. The first is Speedway, which was released in Canada, and the second is Speedway 4, which was designed by Atari. Both of these had 3 Pong games and 1 very poor racing game, and they all supported up to 4 players. There is another Speedway console called the S100 variant. It had 3 games and only 2-player support. All 3 of these are about as rare as unicorns. Inspirations for Street Racer came from Taito's arcade game Speed Race from 1974 and Atari's game Highway of 1975. In Speed Race, you have 90 seconds to pass as many cars as you can. Extra points are awarded for driving faster. Atari's arcade game Highway is the first racing game to use a sit-down cabinet. You have a set amount of time to navigate a narrow 2-lane highway where you use the steering wheel to dodge cars. You get a point for each car you pass, but lose all your momentum when you hit a car. Unlike the Indy 500 racing game, which uses special driving controllers, Street Racer uses paddle controllers which were included with the console. This is the first paddle game of the 3 launch titles that uses paddles. It also supports up to 4 players if you purchase a second set of paddle controllers. Check out the artwork for this game. Up until now, all the previous artwork for the games was done by Cliff Spawn. He was a freelance artist as well as Rick Gaitis, who did the artwork for this game. Rick had originally been hired by Atari to do an architectural design for the building entrance. That project led to more freelance work, but this time in game packaging. Rick went on to provide illustrations for NASA depicting space missions and settlements. As an interesting aside, Rick is married to Susan Yackel, who also did artwork for Atari, to include Adventure among many others. Street Racer has 27 variations, and like some of the other titles in which variations include things like invisible sprites or joystick-controlled missiles, the different variations here could be considered valid, including cars, skiers, motorcycles, and jet fighters. Gameplay also varies from shooting down aircraft, avoiding other cars and obstacles, to the opposite of running into objects, and finally doing both within the same game. All variations share the same playfield, which is an overhead view that is split into 2 lanes. In 1 or 2-player games, each player has a lane. In 3 or 4-player games, player must share the lanes and work together as a team. All the variations last 2 minutes and 16 seconds unless one of the players reaches 99 points. At this point, the game ends. The first 6 variations are called Street Racer. As you might imagine, the goal is to steer your car and avoid collisions with 1 or 2 cars at a time. You accelerate with the fire button until it is impossible to actually avoid the cars, especially as they tend to suddenly swerve at the bottom of the screen. All the gameplay on this video was the 2-player versions, which was how the Atari was meant to be played. Many of the 1-player variations have a computer-controlled opponent, and they all act the same way. In these variations, the computer car doesn't steer, it just constantly accelerates. All the initial games for the console were limited to 2K, so this is about what to expect from computer-controlled opponents at the time. The 3 or 4-player versions put an additional car on the track, which is awkward at best. Variations 7 through 12 are called Slalom, and gameplay is very much like the first 6 variations. You control your skier moving through 1 or 2 gates at a time. You get a point for each gate you pass. The difficulty switches can be used on these variations to deduct a point for each gate collision. Otherwise, you just lose time. Three or 4-player versions are also included here, sharing the tracks. The next 4 variations are called Dodgem and are only for 1 to 2 players. The object is to work your way up from the bottom to the top of the screen while avoiding 1 or 2 obstacles at a time. This variation reminds me very much of the earlier handheld auto race game from Mattel that came out in 1974. Here you have 4 laps to work your car from the bottom of the screen to the top while avoiding other car blips. I actually had this game as a kid while my sister had the football blip. The most unusual and unlike Street Racer variations are called Jet Shooter, and it is for 1 or 2 players only. You control a jet fighter equipped with missiles, and your mission is to shoot down 1 or 2 enemy aircraft at a time. It works the same as other variations with 99 points, or 2 minutes and 16 seconds ending the game. This one also uses the difficulty switch, to where you can lose 1 point with each collision in conjunction with losing time. This one doesn't provide much of a challenge once you get into the groove. Got an appetite for numbers? Okay, I got that cheesy line from the manual. In the number cruncher versions, 1 to 4 motorcycle players run into the numbers to collect the point value of that number. This is the fastest variation, as it does not take long to collect 99 points. You do have to make sure you are lined up with the number while collecting it. Hitting either side will result in a collision. Once again, in the 4-player version, teams of 2 cooperate to crunch those numbers. The last 3 variations are called scoop ball. It includes variations for 2 to 4 players. You control a car with a scooper on the front and go about collecting balls, which are shaped like plus signs. Once you have 1 or more balls collected, you deposit them in the computer-controlled collector. The manual also calls this a scooper. You get a point for each ball you collect, and 3 points for each of them deposited. I found this to be the most entertaining of all the variations. As one of the earliest games written for the platform, Street Racer suffered from unattractive, blocky graphics. In a 2007 interview with Digital Press, Kaplan was asked what he would change about any of the games he had written. He said Street Racer is one game that lacks good gameplay. He took out a moving playfield because it didn't flow right and tended to flicker. He also said a smooth-scrolling playfield would make the game play better. According to Kaplan, later racing games released for the Atari, such as Activision's Grand Prix, were able to offer improved graphics and gameplay. Grand Prix was programmed by David Crane in 1982. It's got single-line multicolor sprites for the cars, and the edge of the track has moving trees to give you a sense of speed. During that 5 years, there were a lot of programming tricks and techniques learned to achieve something like this with no flicker. There are also 2 hacks of Street Racer available on the Atari Age forums. One turns the street black, while the other allows you to roll over your score. This removes the 99 point limit, ending the game and making all games last the whole 2 minutes and 16 seconds. This version is handy for the number cruncher variations. In the end, I'm going to agree with Kaplan about Street Racer. It was certainly better than the racing games on the Speedway consoles. The variations are interesting, and I did have some fun playing the scoop ball variation, but in the end, it did lack a lot pertaining to gameplay, and I don't imagine I will be going back to revisit this one. Apparently, critics at the time agreed, as Street Racer was reviewed in Video Magazine and given a score of 5.5 out of 10. Well, that's it for today's video. Have you played this one before, and what are your thoughts? Did you find it short on gameplay? Let me know in the comments below. Take care, guys.